Hey loves, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. My name is Audrey and I make content about all things wellness, and if that's your kind of thing, I hope you consider staying by subscribing. It's nice here, it's a vibe. So today I am back with another book review, and this month's book is The Richest Man in Babylon. Let's get right into it. Giving a general summary of the book, and then I'll point out the things that stood out most for me. The Richest Man in Babylon is a book that was set about 8,000 years ago in the city of Babylon, which at that time was the richest city, and it had a lot of ingenuity and it had a lot of rich men, but the richest one was called Akkad. And how the book is written is through stories of different men and how they gained their wealth. Some stories are about how people got out of debt, some stories about how people got out of slavery, and all of them I think are still relevant in today's economy, and that's why I think this book is very popular. So according to Akkad, who is the richest man in Babylon, you need to make sure that of all your earnings you save 10% in order for you to invest that, and those investments will bring you more and more money, and that's how you build wealth. So I'll read a quotation from the book. Budget the expenses that thou mayest have coins to pay for thy necessities, to pay for thy enjoyments, and to gratify thy worthwhile desires without spending more than 9/10 of thy earning. So basically, make sure that your monthly budget falls into 90% of your income, and make sure that you save 10% and you invest it. And before I started reading financial books, I always thought, people that are always talking about savings have a lot of money, and how do you expect me to change my budget? All the things that I do are necessary. But when you take that 10% out first, you'll see that everything else will fall into place. Of course, it means you need to make an adjustment here and there in your lifestyle, but it's necessary, and it is delayed gratification, but the gratification will come and it will be worthwhile. So it's an important thing to do. Pay yourself first. And actually, that same concept is in Rich Dad Poor Dad. Pay yourself first. Under this lesson, I wrote down these 3 points. Living below your means, and under that I wrote, live upon less than you earn. Seek advice from those competent enough from their own experience, and make gold work for you. So seek advice from people who are more competent than you. Means if you want to invest in crypto, for example, you shouldn't go to someone who hasn't made a ton on crypto. You should go to someone who has experience in crypto over the years and has actually made a lot of earnings from it. If you want to invest in the chicken business, for example, find someone who is doing it on a larger scale, and if they had started from a smaller scale, find out how they grew their wealth over time. Never ask advice about a poultry business for someone who is in the crypto business. Basically, make sure that your expert is actually an expert. And this is because of a story they told about Akkad himself, who had saved 10% of his earnings for quite some time, but he lost it because he put his trust in the wrong person and he lost all his savings. So when you invest, make sure that you've done all possible research and also consult with experts. This is also the concept of making gold work for you. So not only should you save, but you have to turn your savings into children, and then your children have their children, and then the next thing you know, you have an army of gold working towards making you wealthier. And that for me was the most important point. But let's move on to the next one. I wrote it down as this: opportunity is a haughty goddess who wastes no time with those who are unprepared. So In the particular parable that brought this up, you can hear stories of men who had a lot of opportunities, but they didn't take action. And the reason why they didn't take action was either they hesitated, they thought the opportunity was too good to be true, or they were just not prepared to take on the opportunity when it came. And this happens to all of us, I think. We have procrastinators and we have doers. We have people who do all the market research, but they will never take action. And I sometimes am guilty of that. But like I said in the last book review, I have stopped doing that. I'm taking on every opportunity that is presented to me. And if I have my eggs in a lot of baskets, some of them are gonna hatch. That was the second point that really stood out for me. Okay, so the next thing that stood out for me was a parable of a man that gave his son a bag of gold, and he also gave him some lessons, and these are called the 5 laws of gold. And in this parable, this son lost all the gold because, again, he trusted an expert that wasn't an expert, and he lost all his money. But then he remembered the 5 laws of gold that his father had given him, and he started earning the money back. And then instead of 1 bag of gold, he then had 3 bags of gold. So his father then entrusted him with his whole estate, so he had quite a lot to inherit. But let me just read out the 5 laws of gold. I'm going to put my head down, I'm sorry. Gold cometh gladly and in increasing quantity to any man who will put by no less than 1/10 of his earnings to create an estate for his future and that of his family. So the 10% savings. The second one, gold laboreth diligently and contentedly for the wise owner who finds for it profitable employment, multiplying even as the flocks of the field. So your 10% needs to be invested so that the children can have their children and you have an army of gold. Third law, gold clingeth to the protection of the cautious owner who invested under the advice of men wise in its handling. So make sure when you're taking advice from an expert, it's actually an expert who has experience in this kind of investment. Number 4, gold slippeth away from the man who invests in businesses or purposes with which he is not familiar or which are not approved by those skilled in its keep. Same lesson. So the 5th one, gold flees the man who would force it to impossible earnings, or who followeth alluring advice of tricksters and schemers, or who trusted to its own inexperience and romantic desires of investment. So basically what this is saying is, when you hear an idea that sounds too good to be true, it probably is. You can't expect to give someone $500 and then they tell you, oh, every week you're going to be earning $250 from your $500. And with all this, you don't have to work a minute of your whole week. We do everything for you. We're just looking for an investment. This has happened a lot of times in Zimbabwe. People actually open some offices, and if you go there 3 months later, the offices are closed down. Someone else has started renting that office. So if an opportunity sounds too good to be true, it probably is. It's better for you to invest in something that will give you compounding interest and that is safe and secure, because you wouldn't want to lose your life savings just because you thought that someone had an amazing idea that no one else has heard before, but that was going to earn you millions. Okay, so according to the history of Babylon, the Queen Samira was the one who erected the walls that were impenetrable. And because of this, when a lot of people came to attack the city, even though it would take, in this particular book, they talk about a siege that lasted for about 5 weeks on the walls. But eventually the enemies of Babylon gave up. And there was one soldier that everyone would approach and ask, oh, we are so afraid. Are we going to be protected? Are we going to win this? Are the walls going to fall? And then his response would always be, the walls of Babylon protect its people. So basically, the analogy is that you need to make sure you are protected always, and this means you always need to have an emergency fund. You always need to have savings so that if anything ever happens with your source of income, with the economy, you are safe and secure. So the main point of this is that we cannot afford to be without adequate protection. And the last point that stood out for me was basically an analogy of slavery. Our expenses are basically our slave masters. And how they explain it in the book is that when you spend more than you have and you have to take loans to live a lavish life in that time in Babylon, and now I think it's most applicable because we live in a consumerism society where we have a new release of a phone every 6 months. We have a new release of a car every year. We have fast fashion. We have new trends coming up that will be in vogue. We have so many things that we are told to consume, and now it's more convenient than ever. All you have to do is link your credit card, your debit card to your many applications that you shop from. If you don't feel like cooking, you have an application to order and it gets delivered to your doorstep. So I think being a consumer has become more and more convenient. And I know for some things you have payment plans. For example, on Fashion Nova, you can pay in 4 installments. That means even if you don't have the full amount of your purchase, you can still get it. That means you are spending more than you have, right? So in a society like that, you have to make sure that you don't pay your slave masters more than you can afford. We have a lot of slave masters. We have rent, so your landlord is a slave master. Some people have insurance, so that becomes a slave master as well. You have to pay the supermarket. When you buy food, that's another slave master. When you buy clothes from shops, that's another slave master. And how much have you actually kept for yourself? 10% investment, compounding interest, and you can become wealthy. So you have to try and make sure you reduce your slave masters in order for you to build your wealth. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video. Please let me know if this was helpful for you. Please let me know if you've also read The Richest Man in Babylon or you're thinking about reading it. I highly recommend this book. It was one of the most interesting financial books for me to read because they were real life stories, real life parables, and you can actually compare it to your own life and apply it accordingly. So I love this book. I hope you will too. And if any lessons have stood out for you, please let me know down in the comments, and please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next Sunday.